Hi, my name is Alejandro Pérez Pérez, and this is the AI Coffee Podcast. Every week, you will have one disruptive aspect of technology and artificial intelligence for the time to drink a cup of coffee. Today, we have a guest from India, but also from the United States. Her name is Sahaj, and we are going to talk with her a lot about AI for good, AI for ethical reasons, and responsible AI. Welcome, Sahaj. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. First of all, I would like to thank you for having me on this session today and giving me the opportunity to share my insights. I'm really grateful to you.
Thank you also for being here. I think it's a pleasure having guests like you. And that, like, we are going to talk about a topic that I like a lot, which is, let's say, AI for humans and ethical AI. So I'm really happy that we are talking about that today. And just before we start talking about these very relevant topics, I will present you a little bit for the audience. So, Sahaj is a policy expert and researcher with extensive experience in the intersection of artificial intelligence, public policy, and education. Also, she focuses on developing ethical guidelines for human machine collaboration, and her work revolves around AI governance, responsible AI, and creating frameworks for ethical AI deployment. Wow, what a lot of things, Sahas. I think we are going to discover with you a lot of relevant topics nowadays. That is not only the technical aspects of AI, but also talking about the social implications, which is something I like to talk about in this podcast. But can you maybe explain a bit for the audience? What was the idea of your, let's say, journey inside AI, and why did you create this intersection between the public policy and the AI? Why do you want to go in that direction?
That's actually an interesting journey. So, actually, when I started my doctoral studies in the fall of 2019, and probably just a few months later, COVID came in the March of 2020. So all of us were forced to work from home, staying away from families, and since COVID was kind of something very new, dangerous, and all of us were not equipped with the right amount and right sources of information. Like we didn't know how we should behave or what precautions should be taken. There were no scientific evidences available. And as you know that there are a lot of conspiracy theories going on around on X and other social media platforms. So during this time, my research had just taken up a good pace, and I was working on how to kind of communicate scientific messages using visual analytics. So that was the area of my focus. And then when I saw during the time of COVID that people were so frustrated because they didn't know what to do, how to do, where they should go to look for these kind of information or in things like that. So that's when, and AI was kind of in very infant stage. So that's when I thought that why not utilize this emerging technology for a public good, right? Because when this kind of technology is emerging in nature, we can definitely try to bring it into a broader purpose so that a large section of society can be benefited from it.
It's really interesting, your perception, and I agree with you that such a big technology discovery, let's say like AI, is relevant to keep it for all in the public sector also, and not only, let's say, in a couple of big companies. But talking a little bit more about you and little by little going through the topic, uh, when I saw on LinkedIn that you were doing a PhD recently, I don't know if you finished, let us know. But while you were doing this research and this, let's say, important part of your life, maybe, what was the main challenge you discover, for example, while trying to integrate AI and public sector?
So actually, here's the thing that because AI is a very critical and emerging landscape. So Like you sleep for 6 hours in a day, you wake up the next day, and there are 15 new developments in the field. Like maybe Meta has released some new LLM, or some country has adopted few new guidelines, and so many things happen at a very rapid pace. So it's very difficult to keep abreast of all these changes. And that is one of the major challenges that we face when working on such an emerging technology, because we do not have a full picture of it at the moment. Maybe 5 years down the line, we'll have sufficient knowledge with ourselves, but currently, no, none of us have any idea about where this will go and how this will take shape.
Hmm. Actually, a couple of episodes ago, the episode I recorded with Oscar Corcho, which was one of my teachers in a master I did of AI, he said the same, that one of the main challenges for PhD students was that, like, nowadays there's like too many things happening about AI at the same time, than that uh, you can become, let's say, burnout or stressed because you don't know what to do, and it's very complicated to be focused on on one specific topic. And as you mentioned, no one really knows exactly what to do. So this is the moment for, let's say, playing, trying to understand a little bit everything, and trying to create, maybe for the first time, something. So yeah, I think even in the public sector, things are, and hopefully maybe some steps behind. So the opportunity is big, as I can imagine.
Exactly. And like if you look at these policies from the perspectives of a regulatory body or from a compliance perspective, the European Union have their own AI Act, which is a very comprehensive legislation in nature. So from the 1st of August, it came into effect, and it will be implemented from February 2025 onwards. The United States has an executive order on AI for the safe and trustworthy implementation of AI by the White House. And several other countries like China, Australia, have their own frameworks for responsible AI governance. But what happens is then these regulatory bodies release the protocols and guidelines, but there is no kind of single consensus on what should be done. And that's where the
Mhm.
kind of confusion arises.
Do you think maybe soon, I mean, this is like maybe trying to imagine the future, but do you think that soon we will see, let's say, a global AI, I don't know if even regulation, but a global AI framework, that we will be more or less globally understanding AI in in one way?
So the problem is that often there is no kind of, at present, if you ask someone what is responsible AI or what is trustworthy AI, there is no single concrete definition of it. There is a lot of literature around these governance, AI ethics, responsible, and everything. But if you look through the literature, then you'll see that there are plenty of definitions or plenty of concepts introducing these terms. But there's no single concrete thing which defines or which puts it in a simple layman terms.
Mhm.
And that's why
So, mhm.
people, yeah.
No, I was saying that. So you think it's going to be hard, right?
So there are two things involved here. First is that there needs to be a global cooperation for these legislations and guidelines, like authoritative bodies from global north, the global south, and every region around across the globe need to come together and put forward their ideas on how this should be put into practice. And second is that when devising these kind of strategies, people from every section of the society need to be taken into picture. Like their voices need to be heard. Like it's not just about the policymakers or the government. Even the common people need to have their voices heard. Only then these policies will be effective and they can be put into actual implementation.
I agree with you, but this is usually something I listen. Like, it's nice to have this collaboration and creating bottom top to top, right? This is like the term policies, which is like coming from uh, real people to the government, for example, or the policymakers directly, like in this direction. But I guess when we talk about AI, it's usually very complex. So usually, most of the regulation, and you mentioned the one in Europe, most of them are top to down, so top to bottom. So they are coming from the European Parliament or the European Commission, and then going to Europe, let's say to the Europeans. So, do you think it's really possible to create this when we talk about very technological issue?
So, as you mentioned, with the example of the EUA Act, the geography also plays an important role because when these policies are being drafted, different societal and cultural norms also need to be taken into consideration. Like, say, for example, if for certain countries or regions, if AI models are being used for hiring or recruitment purposes, then it's highly possible that these models could be biased towards certain gender, ethnicity, or race. And this could vary from region to region. And hence, there is kind of no one size fits all solution. Like, you cannot develop a set of 10 guidelines and say, hey, this is it. No, because that definitely wouldn't work. So we need to tailor them based on different variables like the country, I mean, the geographical location, the background of the or the living standard of the people of the country, the overall economic development of the country. All these variables need to be taken when devising these kind of policies and strategies.
Mhm. So what you're mentioning is that instead of, let's say, creating something from like each person that could be represented or talking directly with everyone, is more about having an eye about every kind of, let's say, group of population, and the disparities that they could have, or the access they could have to media or to internet or to technology, for example, and trying to create the systems to not only thinking in one specific group but all, right, something like that. This is what you are mentioning. Yeah.
That's correct. Because even though the overall structure, the skeleton may remain same, but these minor moving blocks uh, do change based on the factors that I mentioned. So, for example, the executive order on AI by the White House in the United States has a few different perspectives on sorry, utilization of AI for recruitment and training purposes. Whereas the same thing in the EUA Act is categorized into four levels of risk based on the unacceptable, acceptable, high, and low risk. So even though the underlying concept may be similar, but the overview varies based on the application.
Hmm. Yeah, I get it. And let's talk a bit about USA, because well, you focus part of your study and your, let's say, your career on the USA landscape. So, talking about AI, do you think the USA is doing enough to set global standards for AI ethics and transparency? What's your opinion?
So actually, today is a very good day to talk about this because exactly 1 year ago, on November 4, 2023, President Biden signed the executive order. So today marks exactly the first anniversary of the executive order.
Wow, what a coincidence.
Exactly. And so this is just an executive order, not any kind of legislation or a law like the EU AI Act. So there is one major difference. And another thing in the United States is that the approach towards responsible AI is very fragmented in nature. I'll tell you a few examples. Like, every state is kind of striving towards having their own policies, like the NYC Law 144, which puts a kind of restriction on utilizing AI models for certain high sensitive areas like finance and healthcare. Then there is the California SB 1047, which has 9 areas in which AI models can be used under circumstances. Virginia has its own law for AI. Chicago has its own law. So all states are going here and there, devising their own strategies and guidelines, but there is no kind of central approach which states that okay, if you are in United States, you should do this. No, there's it's very fragmented in nature.
I guess this is very hard for, I don't know, a company, for example, because if they want to create a product, they need to have a little bit of, let's say, standards. Because, I mean, even having something in the EU, another thing in USA, another thing in other countries, it's a little bit complicated, I can imagine. But if it's even like more granular and you need to go to the States, I think it's even worse, right?
Exactly. So for companies or startups operating in multiple geographical locations within United States or even beyond it, for them it's kind of very difficult because you know that tons of these policies and guidelines exist in the space out there. But often these clients or business organizations do not know what's in store for them or how they should kind of go ahead with their enterprise planning.
Hmm. I see. And also for the audience, for the context, we are one day before the US election. So I guess that the future also will change a lot depending on that election as well. So yeah, when this episode is going to be published, I guess that the elections are going to be done. And you, the audience, you will know more than us nowadays about who won. But yeah, of course, I guess that they have different scenarios, right, in the future, depending on these elections. What do you think?
So as we are just like 24 hours away from the most awaited election, it's kind of an exciting thing because ever since the last election of 2020 and this one in 2024, the role of AI has only increased. The graph has shown an upward trend. And as the saying goes, that every technology has its own equal positive and negative side. So you must have read a lot of articles in some of the newspapers like the New York Times or the Washington Post stating the misuse of deepfakes and the nuisance around it. Like people used to create a lot of deepfakes of the presidential candidates, and then there was a lot of misinformation and rumors going on around. So for the laymen who are not aware of these things, it's they can easily believe what they see without actually verifying whether the information is true or false. And that's where AI policy and governance is very much needed, especially in a democratic and superpower country like the USA.
Hmm. Yes, actually, I talk about that in another episode, the 39th, I think. But I agree that it's very relevant, and this is the first U.S., let's say, presidential election since ChatGPT and these super powerful generative AI models appear. So it's a topic. It's a topic how AI is used for creating, let's say, noise and deepfakes. It's very relevant, and it's true that, for example, in the European Union, with the new law that you mentioned before, the new regulation for the whole EU. Now, if you create a deepfake of someone, you need to specify everywhere that is an AI generated picture or photo, which it's something. At least, I mean, this advertising is something, and I guess that in most of the world you don't need to do it. And if you are not ethical, you will not do it. So maybe you create these deep fakes that, yeah, create noise and, yeah, could create a problem with the democracies. Yeah.
Even AI can imitate voices and create speeches in the voice of the original speaker. So if you don't actually dive a little deeper and see if it's true or false and just rely on whatever you see or hear, you can be easily misguided. And that's what I think is happening with the current US election. So, and that's why I said that it's a very exciting time to see where this will go tomorrow and what results will be declared in the coming weeks. And everyone's
Hmm.
excited because in 2020 the role of AI was a little less because we were surrounded with COVID and a lot of things were going on. But now with the situation with the wars in Middle East and the rise of AI for these kind of things, the US election has gained a major publicity.
Hmm. I see. And what about India? Because now we talked a little bit before. You are living in India, and I guess that you have a lot of also information from India AI landscape. So, is there any regulation in India nowadays, or maybe there anything related to AI? Because from, for example, I live in Madrid in Spain, and from this, let's say, part of the world, we see that more and more IT and technology companies are going to India, and India is a very relevant player when we talk about computer science. So I don't know if is there anything related to AI also.
So, India currently does not have its own AI law or bill, something like that. But in the August of 2023, India passed a Digital Data Privacy Protection Act, which talks about protection of personally identifiable information, the PI indicators like race, gender, ethnicity, age, and factors like that. While that law came into effect, a few months later, the Indian government launched some guidelines on implementation of large language models in enterprises. But then the enterprises opposed a lot because obviously they need to, abide by the compliances. They need to obtain some kind of certifications, and they need to show that they are following the rules. So there is a lot of opposition, and ultimately the guidelines were taken down. So currently, no specific rules on utilization of AI models and nothing like that. So people or the businesses can use them as and when they feel the need to do so. And that's where I think that if in a large and populous country like India, if there are certain guidelines introduced, and as you correctly pointed out, that a lot of IT companies are coming towards Southeast Asia, establishing their hubs in India. So if India launches its own AI Act, just like maybe the European Union or something like that, then it will be very beneficial, because AI is currently the need of the hour. And just like any new technology, we need to put safety guardrails around it, so that we need to ensure that there are no unintended consequences.
Hmm. Yes, but it's also very relevant what you said, because maybe we can go a little bit through the what could be a good regulation, because um, regulating, when we talk about AI and also talking about the AI Act, for example, um, it's more about not banning specific products. It's more about um, having being aware of the risk of specific parts of AI or specific AI models, and with this awareness, protecting the model, let's say, or having really like a safe environment for working with it. Because, for example, you could have a very powerful AI model that could see yourself maybe with a picture naked, for example, and it could be very beneficial, maybe for a medical reason. So I cannot imagine, but imagine that there is a way, a possibility that this could be beneficial for medical things. So it would be also very risky if it will be used with a bad and unethical way of using, for, I don't know, creating deep fakes of famous people and stuff like that. So if you want to create something like that, or a startup want to create something like that, they should be aware of this is like one of the maximum levels of risk, and put a lot of safe borders, let's say, around your product and everything. So this is more the idea. So this is very relevant. So maybe, I don't know if you could explain a bit why you are so, let's say, in favor or for these regulations, and why you mentioned that they, for example, if they would be implemented in India, they would be really beneficial.
So I can explain this with the help of an analogy. Consider the game of soccer. When you play this game, there are two teams, and if you want to kind of win or score goals, you need to follow certain rules and guidelines. Otherwise, you'll be shown a wild card or you'll be given a penalty for any kind of wrong move. And with just a difference in kind of one score, you can lose or win the game, right? And similarly, AI can be considered a kind of playing ground. If you do not follow the rules and guidelines, or if there are no rules and guidelines in place, it's very easy to lose track of what's going on, and there can be ample of unintended consequences. Actually, just a couple of months back, there was an article in the New York Times which showed that there was a survey in the United States where the AI models utilized for maternal healthcare purposes were very biased towards black expecting mothers. This is very bad because you cannot be biased in providing very basic medical treatment to people, right? They can easily have very bad consequences on them. And that's why, after this survey was conducted, the government passed a law which stated that these factors like race and ethnicity should not be put into the training of AI models when utilized for healthcare setting.
Mhm. That's also a technical tip, let's say, for the audience. When you are creating a model, when you, for example, want to predict something, you need to use specific variables from a data set, let's say. So, as she mentioned, you can choose which variables you want to introduce and which ones you don't want to. And if you introduce variables such as the gender of a person, the age, the, I don't know, the ethical origin or something like that, the model could be biased because it could directly say, okay, whatever model you are creating, it could say for one specific, I don't know, for example, gender, you have a more possibility that whatever is going to happen. And easily you could create these biases, and most of the times they are unlikely to be done because maybe you want to create something biased for specific reasons, as I mentioned. I don't know, some specific medical reasons that maybe you want to split between I don't know, males and females. Maybe it's fine, but in for the majority of the reasons, if you are maybe trying to predict fraud in subsidies and things like that, this is completely yeah, unlikely to be done. So yeah, this is really very a relevant point. So sorry, I just wanted to create this let's say technical parenthesis for explaining, because I guess it is not obvious when we talk about AI, right?
Yes. And as you mentioned that currently, like, there is so much of hype around AI, I would say that everyone is kind of running behind it. If you take the example of the education sector, it has undergone a very drastic transformation, and especially with the advent of tools like ChatGPT, Google, Gemini, Anthropic, Cloud, and LLMs like that, because they are open source, easily accessible, and very ready to use. Students have been using them for all sorts of their purpose, like for writing their homeworks, essays, assignments, and typically for every single task that's assigned to them. So, while this can be a complement to what we have been doing, it cannot completely replace our work. And that's why I believe that the hype that AI will take over human jobs and robots will perform those jobs, I do not believe that there is a substance to that hype.
Hmm. No, neither do I. I think they are pushing us to do more things or to go deeper or to go beyond, but not replacing us, of course, or the majority of us, I guess. So, yeah, I agree. But you mentioned a very good point, and I will go back to this. You mentioned education, and I read that you were involved in many initiatives regarding AI education for women and underrepresented groups. So, what do you think that could be done for let's say fostering and promoting this diversity AI education? Yeah.
Yes, so as I mentioned, that people have been using these tools nowadays very regularly for their everyday purposes. So people kind of know how to use them. But the problem is that they do not know how to use it in a responsible and careful manner. And the reason is because of the lack of foundational AI literacy amongst them. And so we need to build that literacy amongst people coming from technical as well as non-technical backgrounds. And for that, there are a lot of online courses and modules available that even though you might not have the sufficient technical expertise, but you can still get started with the basic concepts of AI and understand how it is applicable in your life and how should you be aware of the risk that it poses.
Mhm. And do you think that the gap between different types of people, let's say, or different groups of people, is increasing because of AI? Because for example, I teach to businesses about how to implement AI in their companies for their employees. And one thing I see is that, there is like a lot of people like maybe us that we are really trying to play with AI, being updated as much as possible about the last item about AI. But there is also hundreds or thousands of millions of people that never ever have tried to use ChatGPT, and little by little they are like falling behind. And this gap between, let's say, the first and the last, for me it's growing. So I don't know if you see more or less the same when you talk about these underrepresented groups, or let's say minorities, or even in different countries, different regions. Do you see that this gap of inequalities is growing or ungrowing?
So I do think that this currently, given the state of AI that we are sitting in, it is kind of a little difficult to keep pace with all that's happening. And especially if you do not have the sufficient domain knowledge or technical background, then you can easily get caught in the jargon of all these things. And that's why, as I mentioned, that right from the beginning at the school level, this foundational AI literacy, even providing the basic training related to AI, is a must, because AI down 10 years down the line will have crept into almost every sector of our life.
Hmm. Yes, this is more or less like when we were children, for example, and the first computers appear, that we were taught, I don't know, to use Microsoft Word or something like that, or Excel, or really the basis. So now I understand that, yes, for schools, I think it should be a must, like, let's say, understanding the basis of AI and as you said, the ethical use and what you can do and not, and the danger of using unethical AI. But what about the rest? Because this is going to be for the future. But what about people that are, let's say, more than 20 years old or 30 years old, that are really far away from schools? So, I mean, most of people, I mean, if you see the world, even we are in bubbles. So maybe you and me and our bubble around are using AI a lot, and maybe the bubble around people in the audience as well, because it's very niche. But what about these millions of people that maybe they don't even have a computer or internet connection, or even if they have, they use it only for, I don't know, communicating with family and friends with WhatsApp and stuff like that. They don't, they are really far away from using AI, but also from understanding how this their data is going to be used. So it's very complicated to fill this gap. Yeah.
Exactly. So you mentioned a very good point that people who lack even the basic kind of digital uh, necessities, like who do not have these even access to internet connection, for them getting familiar with AI is a far away thing, because they don't even know what digital world looks like. So AI is even beyond that digital world. And that's why first introducing the digital transformation becomes a stepping stone towards introducing AI. Once they know kind of what the digital transformation looks like, or how the digital or the online life is like, then they can slowly be put into context of what is AI.
Mhm. Yeah, but this is going very slowly. This is my point of view, and I'm afraid. I'm afraid because this is creating bigger and bigger inequalities in the world, because nowadays you can see if you, I don't know, there is, for example, in around me in Spain, I see, for example, my parents, for example, they don't use internet or technology so much because of their work, of their jobs, and also they have, I mean, they were living in a world that it wasn't even necessary, so they use only for watching videos or talking with me using messages. And now they will live a world where everything has changed a lot. And even you mentioned something a couple of minutes ago, talking about elections and things like that. This world nowadays, you need to understand how everything could be done, and how the technology could create a deep fake that could be so good that even like you are not going to be aware of that. Because I mean, most of people believe that AI, I mean, like when you create a video or a picture with AI, you can easily understand that it's created by AI, but sometimes it's very complicated and even impossible.
Right.
So it's
Sometimes
dangerous.
these content that's generated by AI is so realistic in nature that it's very difficult to distinguish whether it's AI generated or human made in nature. But what I believe a point here is that when you have dealt with a lot of LLMs like ChatGPT or Gemini, you write in a couple of prompts, you get your answers, and after a lot of prompts and a lot of responses, you'll see that there is a sort of pattern that's visible, which is the thin line of difference between the human cognition and the contents that's generated by this LLM. Because after all, the AI model is as good as the data that you feed to it. And this data is provided by us humans, and that reflects the human cognition and thinking. So I believe that nothing can come at par with the human level cognition.
Hmm. I agree, and also that the innovation and creativity is something only human nowadays, because LLMs could, let's say, copy us somehow, or as you mentioned, there is like specific patterns they use, but it's very very hard for an LLM or an AI model to create something new. I think even impossible, because they try to reproduce a little bit what they have been trained. And of course, innovation is usually about new things that have never been experienced. So this is this is my also my good thing, as like the future is going to be, I'm optimistic because of that, because I think until now AIs cannot replace that on that sense. Yeah. Okay, so just I wanted to tell you that we are finishing because we are little by little running out of time. But I guess it was really really interesting. But just before we finish, I have one question for you that is more about an inspirational message that I always like to tell to the audience that at the end of every episode. So, can you say a couple of words to maybe imagine that there is a person wanting to study about AI tech policy? Yeah, can you give an advice to this person if this person is listening to this podcast?
Sure. So, first of all, the first and the foremost thing is that do not worry or do not be afraid of AI that it will replace or take over the work that you have been doing. Because AI is here for a human machine collaboration purpose. So while it will boost and enhance our productivity while minimizing our time, it will never replace the work that humans can do, especially when a a cognition or intelligence level work is involved. While some of the manual tasks can be automated with AI, but nothing can replace human intelligence. And that's why it's termed artificial intelligence, right? So never be afraid of it. Embrace it as it comes along. And second, when you want to kind of jump into this field of AI policy and governance, the best thing have is to start with a study of what is responsible AI and the principles of it, like the transparency, explainability, fairness, and bias mitigation. That's the best place to get started. And one of the best resources to study this is the NIST RMF playbook given by the NIST organization in United States. That's the best beginner level handbook for anyone wanting to have early level guidance into the field of AI policy.
Great. I will ask you later to send me the reference, so I will put it in the description of the episode for the audience. Okay, so we are finishing. So two final questions I ask my guests at the end of the every episode. So the first one is, which is your favorite type of coffee? Because this is the AI Coffee podcast, and coffee is relevant here. So this is one of the main questions. And then, how can the audience contact you if they want to, I don't know, to meet you or to talk with you about AI? So yeah, can you tell us?
My favorite coffee is the peppermint latte, the holiday edition from Starbucks. I really love having it.
Great, great, great. And what about the contact?
So people can reach me via my email, or can connect with me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I will also put your LinkedIn on the description. So yeah, whoever who wants to connect with you, it's going to be easy, I think.
Yes.
Okay, so Sahaj, thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure having you here talking about AI ethics and regulation. So I hope you liked it. I did, so I hope you did also.
Yep. Thank you
And
so
yeah,
much for
that's
having me here. It was a pleasure talking about these wonderful things. Thank you so much.
yeah, thank you. And also thank you to you that are watching until the end. If you liked it, please subscribe to the podcast. It's easy, it's free, so please do it. And let's see you in the next episode. Bye bye.